Can you please talk about mortgage fraud for profit? Okay. There's two types of mortgage fraud. So this is important. So fraud for profit and fraud for housing. Okay, so both of them, first of all, they're equally bad because it's both fraud, right? One is not better than the other. One is more sophisticated than the other. That's the difference. But if they ever ask you which one is better, neither one is better because they're, again, fraud. Fraud is fraud. And now, fraud for housing, though, this one is done basically somebody wants to purchase a house and they don't qualify for the mortgage, and therefore they are lying in order to qualify for the mortgage, right? So the lying may look like they are misstating their income. So let's say somebody makes $60,000, but the bank needs $80,000 for them to qualify for the type of mortgage they're looking for. Then they change the six to eight, right? They turn the six into eight. So that's one thing. So somebody's basically fudging the numbers, they're increasing their income, or they're not showing the debt that they may be carrying. Maybe they have borrowed money from somebody and they're not telling the bank that they have borrowed money, because bank will look at what the person's income is and what the liabilities are. So liabilities will be anything that they owe to somebody. It could be a car loan, it could be line of credit, it could be a personal loan, anything that's owed to somebody. So banks want to know every single loan that the person has because that's a payment that they have to make. So they would take that into consideration when qualifying them for the mortgage. So in this case, so somebody could be showing a higher income that they normally have, or they may not have a permanent full-time job. So maybe they have a part-time job, or maybe they have a seasonal job, and on the job letter they are saying that it's permanent full-time job. So again, it's lying, right? So they're misstating the facts. That's one type of fraud for housing. So basically, they're lying or they're fudging the numbers in order to qualify for a mortgage for a house they want to live in. So that's one. The second one is somebody wants to buy a rental property, but they tell the bank that they're going to live in the property. So, right now, for example, so we buy rental properties, and right now banks are being very, very strict with rental properties, and it's becoming difficult to finance rental properties just with the bank rates have gone up, and banks are being extra cautious because they believe that rentals will be the first ones to go under. That may or may not be true, but that's their risk criteria that they're looking at. So in this case, somebody wants to buy a rental property, but then bank will require a higher down payment, and they may have stricter criteria and even higher rates for mortgage, right? So in order to save money from that side, somebody may go to the bank and say, oh, I want to buy a house, but I'm going to live in that house. In that case, bank has less restrictive criteria. So you can go as low as 5% down payment. And there are other things like your rates will be better. So there's criteria that they will allow for somebody in that scenario when they're going to live in the house versus a rental property. So in this case, somebody wants to buy a rental property, but they're telling the bank that they're going to live in the house. And as soon as they get the mortgage, then they put the house up for rent. So that's also known as fraud for housing. That's part of fraud for housing. Those are the two fraud for housing schemes, right? So one is around qualification, so qualifying for a mortgage. The second one is around occupancy, so buying a rental property but calling or telling them that they're going to live in it. Now, those are two for fraud for housing. Fraud for profit, though, that's a totally different scenario. So, in this case, people are buying a property in order to benefit from that in some way. So, basically, let's say somebody buys a house and they're not buying to live in the house or to rent it out. They're buying the house maybe to start a meth lab, right? Or they're going to grow pot in it. So, they're using it for that type of purposes. So, that would be fraud for profit. Another option is, let's say somebody buys a rental property. So they buy apartment buildings. They buy an apartment building, 50 units. Let's say it's $1,000 per unit is the rent they're collecting. Now, in this case, they may tell the property management company, show the rent as $1,500 every month for each unit, right? So that's money laundering. So basically, they're showing that the rent is higher than what it really is. So in this case, so 500 times 50, what is that? 25,000. So that is how much money they're laundering every month from that times 12. That's another example for fraud for profit. So there's a whole bunch of schemes like that. I would suggest going through those schemes, but that's the main difference in fraud for housing. Somebody's buying a house to live in or to use as a rental property, but for their own purpose. But in the second case, fraud for profit, there are either money laundering scheme or they're buying it for drugs or anything like that, right? So there's some sort of fraud going on there. So that's the fraud for profit.